All right, strap in, everyone, because we're diving deep into some serious drama today. Exodus chapter 33, specifically how my Christian space interprets it. We're talking God's presence, grace, and a little bit of mystery.
Oh, yeah, Exodus, it's like the heart of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And chapter 33, well, that's the aftermath of that whole golden calf mess. A real turning point for the Israelites.
Big time. So the chapter kicks off with God laying down the law. And it's not just like, hey, you messed up. It's called out as an evil word. What's the author getting at with that, do you think? More than just bad news.
Yeah, evil word definitely ramps up the tension, really drives home how far off track they've gone from God's will.
Like a total breach of contract.
You could say that.
And then the people's reaction. Intense. Everyone's in mourning, stripping off their jewelry, their ornaments. Can you picture that? A whole nation suddenly visually stripped of their identity.
Totally. And remember, those ornaments weren't just for looks.
Yeah.
They showed they belonged to God, his chosen people. Taking them off, it's not just sadness. It's like saying, we messed up so bad, we don't deserve this anymore.
Like a public shaming.
Kind of, yeah. It's almost like a visual metaphor for spiritual death.
Yeah.
Rebelling against God, they're cut off from the source of life.
Heavy stuff. And then God uses this phrase, stiff-necked. Ouch. What does that tell us about where they're at spiritually? And why would God's presence be a problem for them at this point?
Stiff-necked. It's all about pride. Refusing to bend, to God's will. The opposite of that humility you need for God's grace to work. And you got to remember, God's presence, that's powerful stuff. Transformative, even overwhelming if you're not ready. Imagine it's like trying to fill a cracked vase. You just won't hold the water.
So they weren't in the right state to be in God's presence without, completely shattering.
Yeah, exactly. They needed some spiritual softening up.
Yeah.
And that leads right into the next visual, the tent of meeting. It's moved outside the camp. What a statement.
Like being put in timeout. So that physical separation, that's mirroring the spiritual disconnect we're talking about.
Absolutely. It's like a visual representation of that broken relationship.
Right.
But even with that distance, God's still providing a way to connect. He doesn't just abandon them.
And they're still showing reverence, even from afar, standing, watching Moshe go in and out, even prostrating themselves. That's a mix of fear and longing, right?
It is, isn't it? They recognize God's power, his holiness, even after messing up. Like they know they messed up, but haven't quite figured out how to make it right. Still yearning for that connection.
And here's where Moshe steps up, right? He's not just the messenger anymore. He's talking to God, making some bold requests, not just receiving instructions like, okay, God, let's discuss this.
Totally. It's a shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
Moshe takes initiative. He's wrestling with God, trying to grasp his plan. But think about it. He's doing this without knowing everything. No Messiah in the picture yet.
Right. We're sitting here knowing the ending, and he's just trying to make sense of it.
Exactly. He's working with the covenant promises, but missing a key piece. We should realize, even the big names in the Bible, they had doubts, uncertainty. It humanizes them,
Definitely. Faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting even when you don't. And his first big ask, God has to go with them to the promised land. Not even a question. More like, nope, we're not going unless you're coming. What's that about? More than just feeling safe.
Way deeper than that. It's about identity. Having God with them, that sets them apart, makes them special, different from everyone else.
Like their ultimate status symbol.
You could say that. And that sets up a huge idea in this chapter, right? God's presence, it transforms not just individuals, but whole communities. Collective identity, shared purpose, all flowing from being in a relationship with God.
Okay, so God's got to come along for the ride. That's settled. But then Moshe gets even bolder. He wants to see God's glory. Talk about shooting for the stars.
He does, doesn't he? And God actually says yes.
Yeah.
But there's a catch. He can only see God's back.
Wait, what? That's cryptic, to say the least. God playing a cosmic joke. And what's this about goodness and God's name? How's that all tied together?
No cosmic joke, I promise. It's all symbolism. Think of it like this. Seeing God's back. It's like understanding his actions, his nature, but not his full being. Like seeing a painting and getting a sense of the artist, but not meeting them face to face.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this.
Right. And this connects to the fact that, the Israelites at this point, they've only had physical redemption from Egypt. No spiritual redemption yet. That comes later with Jesus. So seeing God's back, it's like foreshadowing a hint of the bigger picture.
Like a sneak peek.
Exactly. We get that aha moment because we know the whole story.
But then it gets even weirder. Moshe's in a rock. God's hand covering him. I heard there's debate about mistranslations here. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, it gets a little mystical. The original Hebrew, it suggests Moshe's inside the rock, not just beside it. And that links to the whole place with me idea, God's hand covering, heavy symbolism.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. Break it down for me.
All right, so big picture time. The rock, it becomes a symbol of Jesus, ultimate source of redemption, right? And hand covering, that's God's protection during transformation.
Yeah.
So seeing God's back now, it's like seeing God's nature through what Jesus does.
So less about seeing a figure, more about understanding God through his actions, like a whole different way of seeing.
You got it. And it all circles back to spiritual redemption. Through Jesus, we truly see God's face, so to speak, because he perfectly shows us the Father's heart.
Mind blown. We just cracked a secret code or something. This whole chapter, it's like a build-up to understanding God's presence, the journey of faith.
It is. It's a journey we're all on, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But hold on, folks. We're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to unpack here. Stick with us.
Welcome back, deep divers.
Yeah.
We are right in the thick of Exodus 33, and let me tell you, it's getting even juicier.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. Every layer, more depth, more meaning. It's so true. Last we left off, Moshe got that glimpse of God's glory, but just his back. We were talking about how that connects to the whole idea of spiritual redemption that comes later through Jesus.
Right, because remember, at this point, the Israelites are under the old covenant. Their relationship with God, it was all about outward stuff, rituals, laws.
So all those sacrifices, the tabernacle setup, that was their main way of connecting.
Exactly. But what Moshe's encounter shows is that God's presence, it's not limited to a place or rules. It's way deeper than that, right?
Hey, there's more to this than just going through the motions?
Bingo. But here's the thing. Getting to that deeper level with God, it takes spiritual maturity. Remember the whole stiff neck thing? That pride, that stubbornness. It's a wall between them and God.
So they weren't ready to handle the full force of his presence.
Nope. Like trying to force a square peg in a round hole. Won't work. You got a cracked vase. You can't keep pouring water in, expecting it to hold. You got to fix the cracks first. Same with the Israelites. They needed a heart change, softening that pride before they could truly experience God's presence.
And that transformation, ultimately, it comes through Jesus.
Exactly. He's the bridge between us and God. Makes that close connection possible. Like a potter, taking those broken pieces and making something beautiful and whole.
It makes you wonder, though, if they weren't ready for that deeper level, why even bother dwelling among them at all? Even outside the camp, it's like setting himself up for disappointment.
It's a great question. And it shows us God's grace, his patience. Even when they messed up, weren't perfect, he didn't give up. Kept offering a way back. It took time.
Meeting them where they were at, gently guiding them.
Exactly. And that gradual approach, showing his nature bit by bit, it continues all through history, right up to Jesus. Like a tapestry, slowly being woven, revealing its beauty over time.
Makes you appreciate the whole journey, even the messy parts.
It's all part of it. We all go through that in our faith. Sometimes close to God, sometimes distant, uncertain. But he's always working, even when we can't see the whole picture.
Speaking of the whole picture, there's this other layer to the chapter I want to dig into. God passing before Moshe, proclaiming his name.
Powerful moment. God giving Moshe a peek into his very essence.
Our source connects that to God's goodness, his mercy. What's the significance there, especially for the Israelites?
Well, in Hebrew tradition, names weren't just labels. They revealed character, who someone really is.
So it's not just, hi, I'm God. It's more like, this is my core, who I am at the deepest level.
Exactly. And the name Yahweh, which we often translate as Lord, it's all about God's faithfulness, his love that never quits, his endless mercy. So when he tells Moshe his name, he's revealing his true nature.
So even though Moshe can't see God's face directly, he's getting a glimpse of his heart.
You got it.
Yeah.
And it's a turning point for the Israelites. They're starting to understand knowing God. It's not just rules. It's knowing his character, moving past fear into something deeper.
Like graduating from kindergarten to college. More complex, right?
I like that. And it sets the stage for the rest of their journey. Following God isn't about avoiding punishment. It's about aligning with his heart, his purpose for them.
Okay, but here's a question that's been bugging me. We've been talking about Moshe's personal experience, but what about everyone else? What does this chapter teach us about communal transformation? God impacting whole groups, not just one person.
Excellent question. And it's a thread throughout Exodus, right? Their journey, it's not just individual salvation, it's forming a people, a nation for God's purpose.
Not just everyone getting their own ticket to heaven, but creating a community that shows God's character to the world.
Exactly. A society that embodies God's values. Justice, love, being a light in the darkness, showing a different way of living.
That's a big ask, and I bet it doesn't happen overnight. How did these events in chapter 33 shape their collective identity, their purpose? I mean, they went from worshiping a golden calf to trembling before God. That's a huge shift.
It was. And it didn't happen in isolation. It took shared experiences, good and bad, to mold them into who God intended them to be.
Like being forged together, right? In the fires of the wilderness. Hardships, triumphs, doubts, flashes of faith, all shaping their identity.
Precisely. And those shared experiences, they equip them to carry God's presence, reflect His glory to everyone else.
So it's not just me and my relationship with God. It's about us, together, growing as His people, even when it's messy.
Exactly. And that's still a challenge for us today, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do we, as followers of Jesus, live out our faith in community, supporting, challenging, learning to reflect God's heart to the world together?
Now that's a question worth pondering. But let's take a quick break, and then I'll come back to explore some of the practical stuff we can take away from Exodus 33 for our lives today. And we're back, wrapping up our Exodus 33 deep dive, and I gotta say, my mind is still reeling from all these insights. It's been quite the roller coaster ride, spiritually speaking.
It has. From rock bottom, mourning and feeling lost, all the way to these incredible revelations. Exodus 33, it takes us on a journey, that's for sure.
We've seen it all. Israelites at their lowest, stripped bare, separated from God. Then Moshe steps up, wrestles with God, trying to make sense of it all.
And it seems so all over the place at first, but now it's like the pieces are falling into place.
Right. And it all points back to that one big idea, doesn't it? The power of God's presence to transform us. It's not just about where you are or what rituals you do. It's about a heart connection, that deep relationship that changes you from the inside out. And that transformation, it's often a process, right? It takes time.
It does. It unfolds.
Like those back of God moments we talked about. Sometimes we don't see what God's doing in our lives until way later.
Exactly.
We don't always get the why or the when, but we can trust He's working, even when it feels like He's silent.
Such a crucial point. It's easy to lose heart, when you don't see results right away.
Yeah.
Or when you hit roadblocks. But Exodus 33, it reminds us that God's faithfulness, it's not based on what's happening around us. He's always there.
So big picture, as we wrap this up, what are some nuggets of wisdom we can take away from this ancient story? What does Exodus 33 have to say to us today in our crazy, busy world?
Well, for me, one of the biggest things is humility. Remember how the Israelites being so stiff-necked, all that pride and stubbornness, it was a wall between them and God.
Yeah, like a cup that's already full. You can't pour anything new in until you empty it out first.
Exactly. Humility, it's the key. It opens us up to God's grace, forgiveness, guidance, that power to change us.
So it's not about just knowing the right stuff or doing all the right things. It's about the heart.
It is. Recognizing we need God, admitting we don't have it all figured out, letting Him lead.
And that takes us to another big takeaway, right? Seeking God's presence on purpose. Moshe didn't just bump into God randomly. He went to the tent of meeting every day. It was a choice, a priority.
Oh, yeah. It's not about hoping God will magically appear. It's about making space for Him. Prayer, reading scripture, even just being quiet and listening.
Like working a muscle, the more you do it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about creating that rhythm of being close to God, turning to Him no matter what. And as we do that, as we let Him change us, those back of God moments, they start turning into face of God moments. We experience His glory, His love, His power in our lives.
And not just us as individuals, right? It's about our communities too. Exodus 33, it reminds us that God's presence, it can transform whole groups of people.
It can. It's about becoming those who show God's character to the world, His values, His love.
Which, let's be honest, can be messy. Just like those Israelites wandering in the wilderness, our faith journey, it's going to have ups and downs.
Oh, yeah.
We'll
Definitely.
get tested, confused, maybe even wonder if God's really there.
But even then, even when it's tough, we can hold on to that truth. He is there. He's working, even when we don't see it.
So, final takeaway, parting wisdom for our listeners. What's the one thing you want them to walk away with?
I think it's this. Embrace the mystery. The faith journey, it's not always going to be neat and tidy. There'll be questions we can't answer, things we just don't understand.
Yeah.
But that's okay. It's often in those moments of mystery that we grow the most.
Leaning into the unknown, trusting God, letting ourselves be surprised.
Beautifully said. And who knows, maybe one day we'll get to see more than just God's back. Like Moshe, maybe we're being prepared for something even greater, a deeper experience of His glory.
That's a powerful thought to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Hope you're feeling inspired to keep seeking God, keep asking those tough questions, and keep growing. Until next time.